I built this building. I do not mean I laid the bricks, though heaven knows I have hauled enough metaphorical mortar in my life to qualify for a union card. I mean I breathed life into the steel and glass skeleton of Meridian Systems back when cloud computing sounded like a weather forecast, and my office was a repurposed supply closet in Tacoma. I know exactly how the air conditioning hums on the 40th floor because I approved the schematics. I know why the carpet in the lobby is that specific shade of slate gray because it hides coffee stains. But today I was not Martha Hayes, the founder whose portrait hangs in the boardroom like a silent saint of industry. Today I was Ellie, a 50-something facilities temp wearing a polyester jumpsuit that smelled faintly of industrial lemon cleaner and other people's sweat. My hair, usually a blow-dried armor against the world, was pulled back into a severe practical bun. No makeup, no luxury watch, just a crooked name tag and a mop bucket on wheels that squeaked like a dying mouse. I was undercover, a cliché maybe, but when you spend 20 years building a company on principles of integrity and grit, and then retire to the board only to hear whispers that your legacy is turning into a toxic boys' club, you do not send a memo. You go to ground level. You put on the gray jumpsuit. You become the ghost in the machine who mops the elevator banks. I was working in Elevator Bank B, the glass ones that offer a panoramic view of the city. It was a view usually reserved for the people who make six figures and decisions that ruin weekends. I was holding a spray bottle of disinfectant like a shield. The doors slid open on the 12th floor, which housed marketing and product strategy. The air instantly changed. It stopped smelling like floor wax and started smelling like fear, ozone, and expensive anxiety-induced espresso. 3 young men walked in. They were that specific breed of corporate shark in training. They were in their mid-20s, wearing suits that cost more than my first car and radiating an unearned confidence that usually evaporates the moment a quarterly review goes south. Leading the pack was a young associate product manager named Todd Benson. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been molded out of soft dough, and entitlement dripped from his pores. He was holding a large latte with the casual disregard of someone who has never had to scrub a stain out of a rug in his life. He was pontificating to his disciples, 2 terrified-looking interns named Leo and Brett, who were hanging on his every word like he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount rather than reciting buzzwords he had skimmed from a social media influencer. "It is about optics, guys," Todd was saying, gesturing wildly with the hand holding the cup. "You have to dominate the space. If you are not the loudest voice in the room, you are just the furniture. Meridian is a jungle. You eat or you get eaten." He spun around to emphasize his point, a theatrical pivot meant to showcase his Italian leather shoes. Physics, unfortunately for Todd, does not care about career ambitions. The lid of his cup popped off. The latte did not just spill, it exploded. It was a scalding brown geyser that coated the pristine glass wall, the stainless steel railing, and a significant portion of the floor. It missed his suit by a miracle, but it managed to splash onto the toes of my work boots. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. I did not move. I just looked at the puddle, then at the dripping wall. In my old life as the chief executive officer, this would be the moment 3 assistants rushed in with napkins. In my old life, Todd would be apologizing profusely, his face the color of a ripe tomato. But I was not the head of the company today. I was just the help. Todd looked at the mess. He did not look at me. He looked through me. He checked his wristwatch, then sighed, a sound of immense burdened annoyance, as if the coffee had assaulted him personally. "God, what a disaster," he muttered. Then he turned his head slightly, locking eyes with the space above my left shoulder. "Hey," he snapped. I looked up. "Clean this mess up, janitor," he said. His voice was not angry, it was bored. It was the tone you use for a voice-activated speaker that is not listening properly. "Try to get it done before the vice president gets on at the lobby. It looks unprofessional." My grip on the spray bottle tightened. My knuckles turned white. In that split second, I had a flash of a memory, firing a vice president of sales in 2008 for lying about his expense reports. I remembered the power of my own voice, the way I could clear a room with a raised eyebrow. I wanted to use that voice now. I wanted to peel the skin off his ego with a few well-chosen sentences. But the elevator doors dinged. We were at the lobby. I took a breath. I forced my posture to slump. I let the fire in my eyes die down to a dull, subservient ember. This was the test. If I broke character now, I would learn nothing. I would just be the angry founder on a rampage. I needed to know how deep the rot went. "Yes, sir," I mumbled, keeping my head down. Todd did not even acknowledge the response. He stepped over the puddle, his shoes clicking on the polished marble, and walked out into the lobby without looking back. "Unbelievable," one of his minions whispered as they followed him. I stood alone in the elevator as the doors started to close. I looked at the brown stain dripping down the glass. It looked like a tear, or maybe an infection. I pulled a rag from my belt loop. I knelt down, and as I wiped up the lukewarm milk and sugar, I made a silent promise to the steel walls of the building I built. "Enjoy the clean floor, Todd," I thought, wringing out the rag with a violent twist, "because I am about to mop the floor with you." The elevator started to rise again, carrying me back up into the belly of the beast. I was not just cleaning up a spill anymore. I was gathering evidence, and the bucket was getting full. You learn a lot about a person by how they treat the people they think can do nothing for them. It is the ultimate litmus test of character. And at Meridian Systems, the corporate health was dangerously acidic. My first full week as Ellie was a masterclass in invisibility. I realized quickly that a gray jumpsuit works like a cloak of complete obscurity. I could stand 3 feet away from a confidential merger discussion, furiously scrubbing a whiteboard, and the executives would not even lower their voices. I was furniture. I was a texture in the room, somewhere between the potted fig tree and the water cooler. I was assigned to the 12th floor, which had become Todd Benson's hunting ground. I spent my mornings emptying recycling bins that smelled of stale energy drinks and protein bars. I spent my afternoons polishing the glass walls of the conference rooms, which gave me a front row seat to the corporate theater playing out inside. Todd, I learned, was an associate product manager. In startup terms, that meant he was a glorified clipboard carrier with delusions of grandeur, but he played the game with a terrifying efficiency. I watched him operate near the kitchen area on Tuesday morning. A young woman from accounting, Wendy Foster, was struggling with a heavy toner cartridge for the communal printer. Wendy was small, soft-spoken, the kind of employee who does 80% of the work and gets 0% of the credit. Todd walked past without stopping. He saw her struggling. He slowed down, looked at her, looked at the toner cartridge, and then checked his phone. "Excuse me, Todd?" Wendy asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Could you give me a hand? It is jammed, and I cannot lift it." Todd did not stop. "Got a hard stop in 5 minutes, Wendy. Call facilities. That is what they are paid to do." He breezed past her, leaving her flushed and struggling. 10 minutes later, the vice president of operations, a man named Gary Reynolds, walked into the kitchen area. Gary was a senior executive with a heavy gold watch and a loud, commanding laugh. Todd materialized out of thin air. It was like watching a predator smell blood. "Mr. Reynolds," Todd boomed, flashing a smile that was all teeth and ambition. "I was just looking for you. I had some thoughts on that third-quarter supply chain bottleneck. I think we can optimize the vendor list by shaving off the bottom 10%. Gary paused, pouring his coffee. "Is that so? Send me an email, son." "Already drafted, sir. Just wanted to put a bug in your ear." Todd laughed, a practiced hearty sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Here, let me get that wooden stirrer for you." He handed the vice president a wooden stick with the reverence of a priest handing over a sacred relic. I was 10 feet away, mopping a non-existent spot on the linoleum. The contrast was so sharp it could cut glass. To Wendy, Todd was an impassable wall. To Gary Reynolds, he was a doormat. That night, back in my small temporary apartment, which was a far cry from my home in Georgetown, I sat at a wobbly kitchen table with a notebook. No laptop, no digital tablet, just a cheap spiral-bound notebook and a pen. I titled the page "The Rot." Underneath, I started a list. It was not a list of business strategy errors or coding bugs. It was a list of names and incidents. First, Todd Benson, disrespect of peers, sycophantic behavior toward leadership, refused to assist a colleague in distress during the toner incident. Second, the marketing team mocking the receptionist's clothing choices within earshot of the front desk. Third, the human resources director ignoring a complaint about overtime theft because the offending manager brings donuts every Friday morning. The list grew. My hand cramped. The physical toll of the job was real, too. My back ached in a way it had not since I was 22 and waiting tables to pay for coding classes. My hands were dry and cracked from the industrial soap. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental damage of watching my company, my life's work, hollowed out by people who viewed kindness as a weakness. On Thursday, I found myself in the elevator with Todd again. This time, he was not alone with interns. He was on a phone call, speaking to someone with casual arrogance. "I am telling you, it is a lock," he was saying, staring at his reflection in the mirrored ceiling. "I have got Reynolds eating out of my hand. The old guard is clueless. They are dinosaurs. I will be running a division by Christmas. Just wait." He looked down and saw me. I was holding a trash bag, double-knotted. He did not mute the phone. He did not turn away. He just looked at me with that dead-eyed boredom. "Hold on," he said into the phone. Then he turned to me. "You missed a spot in the conference room. The table is sticky." I gripped the trash bag. It contained the remains of someone's tuna lunch, and the smell was revolting. "I will get it right away," I said, keeping my voice raspy and low. "Good," he said, turning back to his reflection. "Yeah, I am telling you, it is too easy. These people are sheep." I walked out on my floor, dragging the bag behind me. Sheep, I thought. Wolves often mistake silence for surrender, Todd. That is usually the last mistake they ever make. I added a new line to my notebook that night. Fourth, Todd Benson. Openly plotting promotion through manipulation. Refers to company leadership as dinosaurs. Dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years. Mammals like Todd were just snacks. The break room on the 12th floor was designed to foster collaboration. In reality, it fostered high-fructose corn syrup addiction and corporate politics. It was an open-plan kitchen with exposed brick, an espresso machine that cost more than a small car, and a long communal table made of reclaimed barnwood. It was the sort of place where people were supposed to bond. Instead, it was where knives were sharpened. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I was under the sink, supposedly fixing a leaky pipe, but actually tightening a bolt that was already secured just to stay in the room. The cabinet doors were slightly ajar, giving me a view of the ankles and shoes of everyone who entered. Todd walked in. I knew his shoes by now. Pointed brown leather. Click, clack, click. He was followed by the hesitant shuffle of sneakers. It was Toby Weaver, a junior developer. Toby was brilliant. I had seen his code commits on the private server I still monitored at night. He was the kind of quiet genius who built the engine while people like Todd painted the racing stripes. "I do not know, Todd," Toby was saying, his voice thick with anxiety. "The data migration is not stable yet. If we push the update on Friday, we risk a 4% data loss. That represents thousands of user accounts. I need another week to run validation tests." I heard the hiss of the espresso machine. Todd was making himself a cup of coffee while Toby poured his heart out about structural integrity. "Toby," Todd purred. The sound was patronizing, like an adult explaining tax law to a toddler. "You are thinking like an engineer. You need to think like a winner. The client expects the rollout on Friday. If we delay, we look weak. I promised Gary Reynolds we would deliver on time." "You promised?" Toby shifted his weight, his sneakers squeaking on the tiles. "But you did not ask me. It is my code. It is our team, buddy." "Look, here is what is going to happen," Todd said, his voice dropping an octave. It became cold. Devoid of the fake camaraderie, we launch Friday. If there are bugs, we patch them on Monday. It is called agile development. Look it up. "That is not agile. That is reckless," Toby argued, showing a rare spine. "If we lose data, it is a public relations nightmare. I cannot sign off on this. It violates our engineering protocols." There was a long pause. The espresso machine stopped hissing. "You do not have to sign off, Toby," Todd said. The warmth was entirely gone now. "I already told Gary Reynolds the code is ready. If you contradict me in the stand-up meeting, you are not just making me look bad. You are making the entire department look incompetent. And I heard Human Resources is looking to trim the headcount in engineering next month. I would hate for you to be on the wrong list." My hand froze as on the wrench. I was staring at the rusty pipe under the sink, my breath caught in my throat. This was not just corporate maneuvering. This was coercion. This was gambling with the company's reputation and client data to save his own career prospects. Under federal and state guidelines, Forcing an engineer to sign off on compromised software while threatening termination could expose the firm to massive liability. Toby went silent. I could practically hear his spirit breaking. He had student loans. He had rent. He did not have the political capital to fight a manager who played golf with the vice presidents. "Okay," Toby whispered. "I will patch it as best I can." "That is the spirit," Todd said, clapping his hands together. It was a loud, jarring sound. "Team player, I love it. Hey, grab me a sugar packet while you were standing there." They walked out. I stayed under the sink for a long time. The smell of the damp wood and the darkness under the cabinet felt appropriate. I felt physically sick. This was what my company had become. A place where the innovators were bullied into silence by the imitators. I crawled out, my knees cracking. I stood up and washed my hands in the sink they had just used. I looked at my face in the chrome reflection of the faucet. It looked tired, but beneath the fatigue the steel was hardening. I was not just going to fire Todd Benson. That was too simple. Firing him was a mere transaction. I needed to perform an excision. I pulled out my phone, a burner flip phone I used for my undercover work, and dialed a number from memory. It went to a secure voicemail box that only 3 people in the world knew existed. One of them was the head of internal auditing, a woman named Laura Higgins, whom I had hired 20 years ago. "Laura," I said, my voice low and authoritative, "it is Martha. Do not ask where I am or what I am doing. I need you to flag all code commits from the 12th floor product team. Specifically, look for a forced push scheduled for Friday. And Laura, do not let that update go live. Sandbox the deployment. Let them think it is live on the main servers, but keep it completely isolated. I want to see exactly what happens when it runs." I hung up the phone. Todd wanted to play chicken with a cliff. Fine, I was going to move the cliff. But I also needed a solid legal anchor. Under Delaware corporate law, which governed Meridian Systems, a manager owes a strict fiduciary duty of loyalty to the corporation. By intentionally deploying defective software to secure a personal promotion, and by threatening a subordinate to cover up the defect, Todd was committing a severe breach of fiduciary duty. If I could prove he forged the authorization, it would be even simpler. The trap was set. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being in a room full of people who have decided you do not exist. By the 4th week of my undercover work, I was haunting the boardroom. The weekly strategy meeting was held in the glass-walled conference room on the executive floor. I was sent in mid-meeting because someone had spilled a green smoothie on the side table. The room was filled with directors and vice presidents. Todd was not there yet, but his director, Roger Dixon, was leading the meeting. Roger was everything Todd aspired to be, louder, richer, and completely detached from the daily realities of the business. I entered quietly with my bucket. No one stopped talking, no one looked at me. "The issue is not the product," Roger was saying, pointing a red laser pointer at a graph that was trending downward. "The issue is the legacy drag. We have too much support staff, too much overhead. We need to trim the fat." I sprayed the green sludge on the table. Trim the fat, I thought. That was rich coming from a man whose monthly expense account included dinners at steakhouses that charged $50 for a baked potato. "Exactly," a vice president agreed. "We need to pivot to a leaner model. Automation and outsourcing. Tier 1 support is a cost center." I scrubbed the table. The rhythm of my arm moving back and forth was almost hypnotic. They were talking about people I knew. Maria in customer service who sent cards to clients. Old Fred in the mailroom who had been with us since the beginning. They were not people to Roger. They were drag. They were red ink on a spreadsheet. "Do not get me started on facilities," Roger laughed, spinning a pen. "I mean, look at this place. Do we really need a battalion of cleaners? Half the time, I do not even know what they do." I froze. I was standing 3 feet from him, right there. The disconnect was so profound it was almost surreal. He was looking at the graph and I was cleaning his mess, and he was asking what I did. "It is background noise," another executive chimed in. "Line item expenses. We can cut 15% there easily. Switch to a contract agency." I finished cleaning the spot. I stood up straight. For a fleeting, dangerous second, I considered dropping the act. I imagined the look on Roger's face if I pulled the pins out of my hair, wiped the grime off my cheeks. and told him that the reason the sales graph was going down was because he had alienated our core user base with a disastrous interface update he had forced through last quarter. But I held my tongue. The trap was not fully sprung. "Excuse me," I whispered, navigating the mop bucket around Roger's leather chair. He did not move his legs. I had to lift the heavy plastic bucket over his expensive shoes. "Watch it," he snapped, brushing a speck of non-existent dust from his trousers. He did not look at my face. I walked out of the room, my heart hammering a rhythm of pure, cold fury against my ribs. Background noise. That afternoon I entered the server room. As a janitor, I had the master key because dust is the enemy of hardware. I locked the door, sat at the administrator terminal, and let my fingers fly across the keyboard. I was not Ellie the cleaner anymore. I was Martha Hayes, lead architect. I pulled up Roger Dixon's departmental logs. I pulled up Todd Benson's project files. I pulled up the Human Resources Complaints database, the one they thought was encrypted. I saw the patterns, the muffled complaints, the restructuring plans that were just code for firing anyone who asked questions, and then I found it. A folder on Todd's shared drive titled Fourth Quarter Strategy. I opened it. It was not a strategy, it was a hit list and a scheme. He had drafted an authorization form to bypass the final engineering check for Friday's software deployment. He had forged the digital signature and security credentials of his vice president, Gary Reynolds. Under California Penal Code, Section 470, which applied to our regional operations office, forging a digital signature or access credential to execute an unauthorized transaction is a felony. In corporate terms, the authorization was void, ab initio, meaning it had no legal validity from the moment it was created. Todd planned to crash the database, point to the forged authorization as proof that Gary Reynolds had ordered the rush deployment, and then position himself to take the vice president's job. It was calculating, illegal, and documented. I copied the entire folder to a secure external server. "Background noise," I whispered, watching the progress bar reach 100%. You are about to find out just how loud the background can get. On Friday afternoon, Todd was laughing with his junior associates, Leo and Brett, in the kitchen area. I was there, changing the trash bag. Todd was holding a half-eaten jelly donut. He looked at his friends, then at me. "Watch this," he whispered. He walked over to the trash can. I was bent over, tying the bag. "Whoops," Todd said. He did not drop the donut in the bin. He dropped it directly onto my head. The powdered sugar puffed into my silver-gray hair. The red jelly smeared against the back of my neck. "Oh, my bad," Todd exclaimed, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Slipped out of my hand. Gravity is a killer, right?" Leo and Brett snickered. I stood up slowly. I turned around. I could feel the cold jelly sliding down my collar. I looked Todd directly in the eyes. "You did that on purpose," I said. My voice was low, steady, and clear. Todd's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then hardened. He stepped closer. "Excuse me? I think you are confused, Ellie. Accidents happen, just like it would be an accident if a complaint was filed about your attitude. I hear the contracting agency has a zero-tolerance policy for rudeness. You need this job, don't you?" He read my name tag with a sneer. "Clean it up, and do not speak to me unless I address you. You are here to serve, not to talk." They walked out. I went to the utility sink. I washed the jelly out of my hair with rough industrial soap. I scrubbed my neck until it was red. I looked in the mirror. "You want to play with gravity, Todd," I whispered. "Let us test the speed of a free fall." The email went out on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. It pinged on 3,000 devices simultaneously, a digital ripple moving through the company. Subject: Mandatory all-hands meeting. Third quarter strategic pivot and special guest. 2. All staff. From Office of the Board of Directors. Please join us this Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning in the Grand Auditorium for a critical update. We will be joined by founder Martha Hayes. I saw heads pop up across the bullpen. "Martha Hayes," a designer whispered. "I thought she was retired. She is a legend." My professor used her original architecture as a case study. "Great." I heard Todd groan from his desk. "A history lesson from the grandmother of the company. I bet she is coming to announce she is donating our bonuses to a charity. I just hope she does not drag it out. I have a lunch reservation at noon to celebrate the software launch." He did not know the update had been sandboxed. He did not know his success was an illusion. On Wednesday morning, the air was crisp. I arrived at the building at 7 o'clock. I did not wear the gray jumpsuit. I wore a navy blue Armani suit, my mother's pearl necklace, and 3-inch heels. I covered myself in a long trench coat and sunglasses to avoid recognition. I took the elevator to the penthouse holding room. The auditorium below was filling fast. I could hear the hum of 1,000 voices vibrating through the floorboards. At 5 minutes to 10, I took the service elevator down to the stage level. The doors opened, and Todd Benson was standing there with Roger Dixon and Gary Reynolds, waiting for the executive elevator. "Staff entrance is that way, lady," Todd said, brushing past me and shouldering me aside to press the button. "Probably catering," he muttered to Roger, "or the founder's nurse." I walked toward the stage door. "Enjoy the ride, Todd," I thought. "It is the last time you are going up." In the wings, the stage manager, Mike, looked at me and grinned. "Welcome back, boss. You are up in 1 minute." The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice boomed. "Please welcome the founder of Meridian Systems, Martha Hayes." I stepped onto the stage. The click of my heels echoed through the silent hall. I walked to the podium and looked down at the front row. Todd was sitting next to Gary Reynolds. He was clapping with a bored expression. Then he looked at my face. Really looked. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. His hands froze. His mouth fell open. "Good morning," I said into the microphone. "For the past month, I have been working undercover as a member of our facilities team. I wore the gray jumpsuit. I scrubbed your toilets. I emptied your trash." A collective gasp swept the auditorium. "I wanted to see what our culture had become," I continued, "and I saw that we have started mistaking arrogance for competence and cruelty for leadership. I saw a director planning layoffs while defending his own luxury expenses, and I saw an associate product manager throw a sticky donut at a cleaner because he thought she was background noise." Todd flinched as if struck. The people sitting next to him slid away, leaving him isolated. "Todd Benson," I said, "please stand up." He could barely move. He stood up, trembling, his hands shaking at his sides. "You scheduled a software launch for today," I said. "You forced the development team to sign off on code that you knew would cause massive data loss. You forged the security credentials of Vice President Gary Reynolds to authorize the deployment, planning to frame him for the failure and take his job." Gary Reynolds whipped his head around to stare at Todd in absolute shock and fury. "Under the law, a forged authorization is void ab initio," I declared. "It has no legal standing, and your actions constitute a flagrant breach of your fiduciary duty to this corporation. We have sandboxed the deployment, and your fraud has been fully documented." I clicked a remote. The giant screen behind me showed the security footage of Todd dropping the donut on my head and mocking me. The crowd erupted in murmurs of disgust. "Security," I called out. 2 large security officers walked down the aisle. "Please escort Mr. Benson from the premises. He is terminated immediately. We will mail his personal belongings to his home in a plastic trash bag." Todd tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. The guards took him by the arms and led him away. "Oh, and Todd," I called out. He stopped and looked back, terrified. "You missed a spot," I said. The auditorium doors swung shut behind him. I turned back to the audience. "This is day 1 of the new Meridian," I said. "We are raising the base wage for all support and facilities staff by 20%, effective immediately, and we are implementing a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect. If you treat people like background noise, pack your bags." The applause started at the back of the room, led by the cleaning staff, and swept forward like a tidal wave. An hour later, I sat in my office. The view of the city was clear. My assistant brought in the squeaky yellow mop bucket and placed it near my desk. I poured 2 glasses of scotch, raising one to the bucket. "To the cleaners," I whispered, "and the messes we sweep away." I drank the scotch. The office felt clean at last.